Hey ambitious dentist, welcome to Start Your Dental Practice, the show for existing and aspiring dentists to take your dental practice to the highest possible level. I'm your host, Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV, founder of dentistmetrics.com. In every episode, we aim to demystify the how to start a dental practice problem by bringing on world-class dentists, influencers, and consultants in the dental industry to pick their brain about how to get past the barriers involved from going from no practice to being a practice owner to owning your own successful dental practice. Today's show features Dr. Graham Dersley. You're going to learn more about Dr. Dersley and his fantastic dental story here in a second. But first, here are the things you're going to learn about today. We're going to learn about what appealed most to Dr. Dersley about dentistry, how Dr. Dersley went about taking over and owning his first practice, the really tough legal conversation Dr. Dersley had to have when taking over his first practice, as well as some ideas for how to avoid or overcome this problem in your future. We're going to learn about Dr. Dersley's thoughts on setting really big goals that are a stretch to accomplish, how setting those big goals can sometimes lead to a feeling of disappointment, why Dr. Dersley sold his first practice that he bought and decided to focus his attention elsewhere, even though business was booming and things were good in the practice he acquired. We're going to learn about what Dr. Dersley looks for in markets when he's starting a new practice. Now that's for you if you're wanting to start a practice as a startup. We're going to look at the key things Dr. Dersley took away from running a successful practice that allowed his next venture to be a success. We're going to learn about the mistakes that Dr. Dersley made with staffing that he had to fix in order to grow his practice and business. You're going to learn the one thing Dr. Dersley focuses his energy on when starting a new practice. You'll learn how Dr. Dersley created a team that matched the culture he wanted to create in his practice. And we're going to learn why most practice owners think managing a staff is a disadvantage and why that's actually a huge leg up as a business owner and operator. At the end of this episode, I'll let you know where you can go to download my personal guide on how to set effective goals to help you implement the advice you hear today. So be sure to listen all the way through this entire interview for that information. Now, to today's guest interview with Dr. Graham Dersley. And today we have with us Dr. Graham Dersley from Practice On Fire. Dr. Dersley is a prosthodontist who has had a unique first decade in private practice. He was a frustrated associate, like I know a lot of our listeners probably are right now. Then he went to being an owner of a small fee-for-service specialty practice. And now he's an owner of a growing multi-location general practice that he started from scratch. So the startups out there, he has a lot of information that could be very valuable to you, and we're going to try and tap into this. He has a good fortune to experience a variety of practice styles. He's got a passion for the business of dentistry, like so many of our guests do, and he frequently posts on Dental Town about the topic. So, Dr. Dersley, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything in the introduction that I missed that our listeners need to know about?
Sure. Thanks, Jonathan. Happy to be here and talk to you about it. That was a great introduction, I think.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your dental story. I went over a little bit in the intro, but tell us about what led you to dentistry. Where'd you go to school? What happened after you got out of school?
Sure. So I'm unlike a lot of dentists. I didn't know from when I was real little I wanted to be a dentist. I had in college a few different options. I knew I wanted to do something kind of in the health sciences. I even considered being a professor. I considered being a physician. I worked in a veterinary office for a while even. One of the big appeals to me that dentistry had was the opportunity to be your own boss. Just from my experience in volunteering at a hospital, I saw what it was like to be a physician, and they definitely had to work under the hospital's rules, the hospital's hours. They didn't have seemingly as much flexibility as the dentists that I knew. And so that's what really attracted me toward dentistry. And I really decided that kind of in my second or third year in college. That was at the University of Michigan. From there, I went to Columbia University for dental school. A lot of that was that, my wife is really into international affairs, and so she wanted to get out of the Midwest, kind of go to a bigger city, and so we kind of compromised on New York. It was a great 4 years there. Columbia is one of those schools, you go there typically if you want to be a specialist. They're really good at getting people into specialty programs, not so good at training people to be general dentists compared to some of the schools out there. So I'd say a majority of my class went into some kind of specialty program or another.
Okay.
That may have influenced me to decide to go into prosthodontics versus general dentistry. Prosthodontics residency was great. I had a lot of experience restoring implants, some surgical experience with implants. Got really comfortable doing dentistry just in general. I came out of there pretty confident in my clinical skills. And so when I came out, I felt pretty ready to own a practice within the near future. That was what kind of drew me into it anyway. And so I knew I wasn't going to be the type of dentist that was an associate for 5 years before I wanted to take the next step to my own practice. I knew that was something I wanted to do pretty soon afterward.
So you kind of had that bug in your ear already that you weren't going to follow somebody else's footsteps. You were going to lead your own path, basically.
Yeah, and even in dental school, in my residency, I was reading Dental Economics magazine, and I didn't discover Dental Town until toward the end of my residency. I started spending more and more time on Dental Town and really kind of reading a lot about business stuff. It was, I had a lot of clinical stuff through the residency, so I was more interested in the things that I wasn't exposed to, which happened to be the practice management side. So I just did as much reading on that as I could. I really wanted to soak up as much as possible.
So you had this plan already that you were going to be a private practice owner at some point in time. I think a lot of people have that idea in their head. And I know that a lot of people also have, kind of a fear mindset whenever they get out and they, maybe have some personal obligations, family obligations, financial obligations to where, at that point in time, it may make more sense to be an associate, which sounds like that. Is that the reason you went into an associateship first, or what happened?
No, not really. I went into an associateship. So my original plan was to go into an office that was looking for an eventual partner. Mm-hmm. So I actually had 2 part-time associateships where both dentists, said that they wanted to have a partnership in the future.
What was the purpose of being in 2 at the same time?
Well, basically when an office takes on a new associate, it's difficult to provide them with a full-time schedule right off the bat. And, I think that's a mistake that a lot of dentists make, is they think they have to hire a full-time associate. So they go from 0 associate at all to now an associate that's there 4 days a week. And they think that somehow that associate's going to be productive for 4 days a week. And that's very difficult. We hear so many stories of associates who spend half their day, just doing nothing. And so, we wanted to avoid that. I wanted to actually be seeing patients while I was in the office. So, having 2 part-time associateships where they could actually keep me somewhat productive was the better way to go, I thought.
How did you get your bosses at that point to buy into that? Because we hear that a lot, where there are associates that go into a practice and they've been promised, like, hey, come on in, the water's great, we're going to be able to, you're going to be able to come in and have all this production, and then in the end they get all the lower producing services. There's not enough new patients to go around, and the entire experience for that associate's pretty poor. Were these 2 practices in very spread out geographic locations?
They were probably about 45 minutes apart. They'd didn't really overlap in their competitive market. I guess that's a good word of caution, though, Jonathan, to anybody out there who's looking for an associateship. The best scenario is if you're replacing an associate who was already productive. If they had an associate who 4 days a week was producing a decent amount of dentistry, and that associate is left to build their own practice, that's an ideal scenario for someone to come in. You already have a patient base for that associate. If someone wants to hire you with the idea of you coming in and building your own practice within their practice, that's not a good deal. I wouldn't recommend that. Build your own practice if you're going to do that.
Exactly. The allure of a paycheck and an already working system is like a siren's call to a lot of people that you think that's going to be the solution. But from the other side of that spectrum, I deal with a lot of dentists that are considering associates, and we've got to tell them, you've got to make this make sense for you in a financial position, because if you're going to be paying somebody else and you don't do anything to change the number of new patients or the number of patients in the practice right now, then you're just going to be paying them what you were producing beforehand. You'll just be making less money. And so a lot of people think in the short term in those situations. When the associate comes on, the long term is the dentist starts realizing his income is shrinking if they don't have any type of professional advice to help them with that part. And so who ends up getting hurt in that situation? It's not going to be the dentist, it's going to be the associate most of the time. What is a way that, so another thing you pointed on is to talk about if you were to be replacing an associate that was already busy. One thing that I think is also important is to try and figure out why that associate left, because there could be some big red flags there. If they moved or they had a spouse that, something happened, if it was, the old doctor or something like that, makes a lot of sense. But I'm sure you've heard horror stories of, terrible bosses that people get promised a buy-in or something like that. And then 2.5 years down the road, that promise is just never coming to fruition.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and the hard part's going to be getting a straight story on it. If you ask the owner, of course, they're not going to say, well, I was treating him like crap, so he left. So, that's a tough one.
Yeah. So that's just some word to the wise. So at what point, whenever you went into those associates, did neither of those work out?
Yeah. So, neither one really, it didn't go as I had hoped it would go. Part of that is due to, I think, patient demand. In a lot of cases, I still wasn't as productive as I hoped I would be. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Part of that too, I think, I can't completely blame the practices there. Maybe as an associate, I think you do have a different mindset, certainly as an associate, than you do when you actually own your practice. So for whatever reason, things just weren't going as planned. My production wasn't as good, had a lot of open time still in the schedule. It didn't quite seem like the practice was ready to support 2 doctors, at least without the owner cutting back their schedule a little bit, which wasn't really in the cards. So about 6 months after I finished the residency, I was fortunate enough to find out that one of the professors, who was a part-time prosthodontist, he was retiring and looking for someone to take over his practice. And so that was my opportunity to, become a practice owner. And I had already started to do some research. I was looking at areas where I could maybe do a startup. I had looked at a couple practices that were for sale. Didn't find anything too appealing. So when this opportunity came about, that was, my first ticket into ownership. So things worked out with that, and the dentist, he was actually thinking about closing the doors on his office.
Wow.
Had no intention of really going through a broker and putting it on the market. He wasn't sure if he could find someone he could really trust to endorse his patients to see. And so, fortunately, we knew each other a little bit from beforehand. We were comfortable. We agreed on a purchase price. It was something for him versus nothing to close the office. For me, it also worked out well. It gave me a base to start with, at least. It wasn't a super big or busy office, but it was definitely a good start.
So you found the opportunity through an old acquaintance, and a lot of people I tell this to whenever they come to me, they'll ask about practices that are available. Here, like for instance, I'm in Central Arkansas, so I have a lot of people in Central Arkansas that come to me and ask about practices available. And a lot of the times I have to tell people, you have to tap your network a lot of the times, because the best deals are typically not advertised through a broker or anything like that, just because you're probably going to have a 5 to 10% increase in price whenever that seller talks to a broker.
Oh, sure.
So yeah, that's a very good point. I just want to kind of touch on. So he was going to close the doors. You decided that you were going to purchase the practice. Did anything, was that a pretty smooth transition?
It was pretty smooth. We had a couple little things, like he, wasn't much into the formalities of business or anything like that. We were just gonna basically transition, with a simple little note that we agreed to do it, and I actually wanted a formal purchase agreement and some of those things that everyone recommends you do. So. That was a little bit of a conversation we had to have.
How did that conversation go? Because I've seen that happen before. That the old doc, especially in Arkansas, it was the way that deal was done when they bought the practice was some spit and a handshake.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, in this litigious society, we have to be careful of these things. And so how did that conversation go? How was it handled?
It was a little tough. Like one of the issues, you don't want to offend someone, right? And it's someone who I did trust. Yet, it wasn't that. For example, let's talk about the restrictive covenant, right? You're going to buy a practice. Having a restrictive covenant on the seller is pretty much a standard thing that you want to do. I was pretty sure he was not going to compete against me. But on the other hand, what if I, 6 months later became disabled and had to sell the practice? Mm-hmm. And I had no restrictive covenant in place on the owner, then a future buyer, that might be a huge issue for them. And it may cost me a lot of value in the practice not having that in place. And so having to explain it to him that way, I think helped, but it was still, he definitely would have preferred the handshake agreement.
So that says a lot to your ability to get through a problem. I think that, I'll be honest, the deal that I was assisting with, the person we were working with, they couldn't get past that. That was in the end, it was a deal breaker that the selling doc would not allow. He wanted the buyer to write all of the purchase acquisition documents, and the buyer would approve or deny it. And so, a purchase agreement is a fairly lengthy legal document that you'd have to have drafted. And if the only thing the seller wanted to talk about was the price, it's like, I want to sell this for, let's say, $500,000, and you want to buy it for $500,000. So that's it. We didn't talk about, the fact that there's accounts receivable, the restrictive covenant, how are we going to transition patients? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? He just wanted to say, here, give me $500,000 and I'm going to be gone at that point. So, it sounds almost unreal to think that people actually, would be in that situation whenever you do all this research like you did on Dental Town, like you do on, just probably reading general business books and how to protect yourself and all this content that's out there, because we know that is the way to do things nowadays, because you hear of so many horror stories. So I think that's a very interesting problem that hopefully not many people are going through. But I had the same advice that you just talked about to my doc, is that you need to sit down with the selling doc and just really explain your fears and concerns and the reason you're putting these things into documents. And sometimes it doesn't work out. Like that one, it didn't work out. I was sorry to say that the seller ended up saying, we're not gonna sell the practice to you because you want to involve these documents, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing that helps is sitting down and having a human conversation with someone. Going back and forth over email or through attorneys really kind of can be, it can stir up confrontation a little more than, if someone sees you face to face, you're expressing some legitimate concerns. And if you have an actual reason for it, not just because, hey, my attorney says we have to do this, but just like the example I gave you with the restrictive covenant, there's like an actual reason beyond just, okay, I'm just telling you I don't trust you. So you just got to kind of spin it in a way that makes sense. But the other thing that, I'm concluding from this conversation is I've seen a lot of dentists where, they have their heart set on a certain deal, but a lot of these deals fall through, right? I mean, in the example you just gave, the seller was just not, dealing in a realistic manner. And if that's the case, sometimes you just have to say no. But at the same time, I recommend if someone really is really wants to become an owner, that they explore multiple avenues all at once, right? So look at a couple practices at the same time. While you're doing that, see if there's any good locations to do a startup in your area. Don't just spend 6 months on one thing and that's all you're doing, because that's going to possibly be 6 months wasted if it falls through.
You hear a lot about the people that do that. Hey, I bought the practice of your dreams, and it was super simple. And then at the end, you don't hear a whole lot about things that went poorly. So that's a good conversation. So you now have this practice. You've acquired it. You're about to start. Tell me about like that first day, like whenever you were going to walk into the practice and be the owner. Were you nervous the night before?
No, I can't say I was nervous, but we'd had a bit of a transition, which helped. So what happened was when we decided for sure that this was going to happen, which was in May of 2008, I let my two employers know about it. That week I told them what was going on. And one of them was very supportive, let me continue working there. Even after I purchased the practice, I worked there for quite a while, because the practice was kind of a part-time practice. Mm-hmm. So I did hold on to my associateship until I grew it into a full-time practice. The other employer basically let me go the next day, and which was a blessing in disguise, because I was a little concerned on my end. Okay, I'm going to have to finish up these cases. Is that going to be kind of a pain? And mm-hmm. I basically got to walk out of there and start spending a little bit of time in the practice that I was going to purchase. So I would spend a couple of days there a week, meeting some of the patients. Actually started treating some of the patients so that the seller could then finish up all his cases without starting anything brand new. So the last couple months he was there, I was doing all the new patients, starting all new treatment plans, and he was basically just finishing up the stuff that he'd already started.
So did you have any worries or concerns after you were started?
Like during that transition period? Mm-hmm. Of course I did, right? So new owner, I was pretty sure that when I first took over the office in August, that my schedule would fall apart, and I'd be coming in with no patients at all, and just the nightmare scenario, right? I just spent all this money on the office and nothing's going on. But fortunately that didn't come true. Things did work out pretty well. But I think you're always nervous, even I've started 2 offices from scratch since then, and same thing, on opening day. There's these thoughts in the back of your head, like, what's going to happen. So anyone who's going through that, just realize that's normal.
Yeah, that's great advice. We talked a little bit before we started about how we feel, there's probably a lot of people out there that don't really know like how to take that first step, what to do. And I think that the point you made prior to this question was really good, that, start, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't get tunnel vision on one practice that you're wanting to acquire, because if there's a propensity for failure in that one practice, you'll have other opportunities possibly out there. And sometimes opportunities aren't super easy to find. Sorry, my headphone just came out. The place I see a lot of people get stuck is that they feel like they need this certain type of income, that they don't want to take the risk to go out and be involved. So you went into this acquisition, you took a risk there in buying a practice. Obviously we want to say we're all prepared and it was gonna work out. And a lot of being a business owner, for people that are out there that aren't business owners yet, is about encountering a problem and then figuring out a way to get past it or make it a better situation. What type of problems did you see after you were the owner that you had to get over or get past?
One of the biggest problems was mindset, I have to say. So when you're an associate, you don't have overhead to necessarily cover. So when you go in, and even if you only see 2 patients that day and do 2 pro fees, at least it's going to put a little bit of money in your pocket, and you're not having to pay the staff to sit around, and you're not having to pay rent and all these other expenses. And when you become an owner, there's, at least for me, the first few months, probably really the first year, I was having to sort of get over that, the fact that there are bills due, and that's going to make you pretty nervous. But maybe that's going to make you work a little harder to grow your practice, so you get to a point where paying the bills is not as much of a concern. And even though my first few months in the practice were profitable, and I was taking home a paycheck that was pretty decent, at least equal to or better than my associateship was, there was still that kind of fear in the back of your mind. Well, what if things go south? And now I could be making negative income on this. And, it never happened, but there's that kind of mindset thing that I did have to sort of have a mindset of abundance and confidence in knowing that, hey, I can do this. This is something, I'm going to grow this practice. It's going to become, a lot more than what it is now.
So mindset, I don't hear a lot of topics about this in dentistry. And I think that that is a shame, because I think I'm a huge mindset type person. So, I do, a lot of self-reflection and a lot of, trying to be sure that I'm keyed into whenever I'm in a conversation and things like that. Because when you get into a business, I've joked about it in the past, but you're used to having somewhat of a singular purpose of, okay, I go to work, I get the work done, and I go home and we're done. With the business, you've got bills to pay, like you said, you've got employees families, you've got your family possibly, you've got all these debt obligations, and then you've got a million small decisions to make every day, it seems like. And all of those things for most business owners can really start to weigh you down. I mean, that's whenever I started my business, that was one of the most surprising things for me to be able to get over, was being able to disconnect from those million decisions that were going on in my head at all times.
Yeah.
So you talked about an abundance mindset, and help me talk to people about what is a way for them to start thinking in abundance mindsets rather than like a scarcity mindset or just being unprepared, because it's really hard to understand the mindset side of these things until you realize it's a problem.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It is I think one of the biggest issues, like you said, if you have confidence that you are going to produce $1 million this year in your office, and you have your mind set up that's going to happen, you're so much more likely to accomplish it, obviously, than the dentist who, is basically just trying to tread water in a small practice, and they are kind of fearful that they don't even know if they can grow a little bit this year, and they just hope that they can pay the bills. How do you get the confidence? I think part of it is having some mentors or someone who's done it before. They've had a successful practice in a situation like yours, right? So not everyone has the ideal situation. You might be working in an area where there's a lot of other dentists around and there's a lot of competition. Or you might be working in an area where not everyone can afford the highest levels of dentistry. And a lot of people just want the basic care. You might be in an area where hiring the best staff is difficult, and a lot of dentists find that, their staffing situation is not the best. But there's been, in every one of those situations, a dentist who has been very successful in the past and who is, really doing well now, setting record months, and you wonder what's the difference between the two dentists. And the only real way to find out is to connect with those dentists, kind of see what they're doing, but not only read about it and learn about it, but implement some of those things. Get busy and all the little things in your practice that can add up to make a huge difference. Ask for referrals, run your schedule on time, give painless anesthesia. There's a million different things that you can do. There's no one silver bullet, but all of them together add up.
So you said there's no one silver bullet, but there's plenty of people out there that will sell you a silver bullet, it feels like, or what they show you as a silver bullet rather than actually being a silver bullet. And I'm a huge believer in mastermind groups. I'm a huge believer in coaching and mentoring. I have a business coach, even though I coach other people about business as well, because there's always, whenever you're running a business, there's always a thing called perspective that you are always in danger of only having your perspective. And the more that you share and have involved with other people, the more you can find little flaws in your logic, and those can only help you, even if you don't take those into consideration, or act upon what other people think. Giving those point of views is really, really powerful, and being able to make actual change and being guided in certain ways. So that's a great way for us to touch on the topic of the fact that you did form a mastermind group. I don't feel like there's enough of those out there in dentistry. I mean, there's people that have local study clubs, but every time I've gone to one of those, it always feels like it's more clinically minded typically, because I think that's probably because from like a financial side, people don't really want to say, oh yeah, I'm doing $2 million a year this year. How much are you doing? Oh, $800,000. I'm not going to teach you how to get to 2 million, because if you did that, you might be taking some of my 2 million.
Yeah, when you're in a local group, there might be a little bit of that competition, especially when you're talking about business topics. Mastermind groups. Dentaltown was my first exposure, really, and just connecting with people, sending them private messages, reading their threads. A lot of people will start a startup thread on their office, and all the steps that they went through, and I learned a ton just from reading some of those. There's so much information you can get on Dentaltown. One of the tricky things about Dentaltown, though, is that there's at least 100,000 people who post on Dentaltown. There's Dentaltown too, a lot of white noise and sidetrack discussions, and some people who throw the threads off track. What I find with a private group, like a mastermind group, where you can control the members, you can surround yourself with people who are successful, who are not going to, you can celebrate your successes with each other. I find. And not just seem like you're just bragging like, like you would if you were on a public forum. That's one of the nicer things about it. Also, people are a little more open to, sharing the magic secrets because they're in a group where, there's not we do have geographic exclusivity in my group. So there's no one who's competing with the guy down the street in the group, right? So we're probably a little more open to sharing our marketing strategies and even our marketing pieces. We can share some of those things, and that's really helpful, I find.
If you go back to the DARE program, whenever we were in middle school, they taught you strength in numbers. And that's definitely the case whenever you're talking about marketing, because the more data you have, the more information you have, the better you can actually, make decisions with, because that's what we're all looking for is data, right? It's like doing any type of diagnosis. You're trying to you accumulate the data, or you make the decision based off of the information you have in front of you to be able to make the diagnosis and actually go forward with the treatment plan, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same way with marketing and having more data. Having people that will talk to you about their data is very, very valuable. So we've talked about mindset. We've talked about finding others that probably going through the same thing you are doing or have gone through what you're doing. That's one of the reasons also for doing these interview series is to kind of get this information out there. You mentioned about saying, okay, abundance mindset. I'm going to say that we're going to produce $1 million this year. Are you a believer in goals in general?
Yes, definitely. I think setting a very optimistic goal or difficult goal to reach, something that's a stretch for yourself, is helpful, I think, because then you are going to work that much harder to get there. At least for my personality, I know everyone's different. I'd say, a lot of dentists are happy to have a steady practice, that's doing well, and they just maintain that kind of status quo for 30 years and then retire. And, that's a great career track. For me, I like to reach for the next goal. It's just part of my personality, and I've found that once I reach that goal, it's not that now I'm in this happy place and I'm satisfied. I'm going to set another goal once I reach that goal, and that can be dangerous too, because you can have this life where you never feel satisfied and content, and that's not the idea there. So I do have to regularly remind myself, okay, look at your situation. This is pretty good. Let's enjoy now, and let's not just always think about this utopia that we're going to have in the future once I reach this goal. Right? So I've learned that about myself in the last couple of years. Before then, it was always kind of like thinking about the future, and we do a lot of, as dentists in particular, a lot of delayed gratification. We go through a lot of lean times and hard work up front in dental school, and have this mindset that, okay, once we graduate, everything's going to be just perfect, and then once we graduate, we're associates and don't have the best associateship, and find that with all our student loans that we're not quite living the lifestyle we want, and looking forward to being owners. And then once we're owners, we're going to be happy. And then once we're owners, then we want to double our practice. And then once we reach that point, we'll be happy. And so just enjoy each step along the way would be my advice.
So what, you talked about the success of reaching a goal and that horizon continually getting farther away, because whenever you get to one horizon, you go to the next. What, have you ever not reached one of your goals that you set for yourself, and how did you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. In my first practice, we definitely started to hit a plateau after about 3 years. The first 3 years were tremendous growth. We were doing probably 100% growth a year. Wow. For 3 straight years. But then, it did start to level off. and I didn't really want it to level off. I wanted it to keep going to a point where we outgrew the facility, and I had to then think about extended hours or hiring an associate or raising fees, whatever, have a capacity problem. And that definitely didn't happen. And part of it was the area. It was a very competitive area. My location wasn't the best. I was in a professional building, kind of hidden away, so I had to do a lot of marketing to make up for that. And then part of it was probably me. There were probably some things that, some opportunities that I didn't see. Maybe someone else could have achieved that, but under my leadership and what we were doing, we did hit that plateau, and still doing very well. I mean, I'd say, it was a plateau that, I should have been quite pleased with. But again, it didn't meet my goal of having that capacity problem.
So how did you get past that?
I sold the practice.
Can't fix it, might as well sell it.
Yeah, I mean, not really recommended as the ideal way to solve that. But it happened to be at a time when I already had the startup going. My first startup was well underway. I was stretched very thin between the two offices, and I was seeing that the startup had more potential. I was in a really good visible location, great demographics. I had a lot more future. The ceiling on it, I thought, was a lot higher. So I decided to focus on that one. And while I'd already built up a lot of equity in my first practice, I just decided to cash out on that.
So what made you decide to start up another practice if the other one was going so well from a growth standpoint? Did you just say, I've done it with this one, I can just do it with another one over here? Is that what happened? Or
part of it was just wanting to have the experience. I had acquired a practice, never started one up, and I'd read a lot on Dental Town and talked to people about successful startups and these offices that were having 100 new patients a month, and I got between 20 and 30 in my area when I was spending $4,000 a month on marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, let's just see what it's like, to start a practice in an area where the demographics were favorable, and just get that experience under my belt.
What do you mean by favorable?
I mean, in my case, it was like, there's different things you look at, right? So the most common thing I think you'll hear out there is the dentist to population ratio.
Mm-hmm.
That's maybe a good thing to start on. Like when I'm researching an area, that'll be the first thing I look at for each. You can do it by zip code at first. Just figure out your dentist to population ratio. That can be done easily using different demographic sites to get your population by zip code, and then you just use Google Maps or yellowpages.com, count up the dentists, and you've got your ratio. But beyond that, there's a lot of other things. So you need to look at the quality of the population, right? Income levels, education levels. The other thing is the quality of the dentists around. So, is each dental office a kind of a nice new facility where they're offering extended hours and a lot of patient conveniences, and working with their insurances, and that's going to be a much more competitive landscape than if you're going into a market where all the dentists are in professional buildings and nobody's marketing, and they're all closed for an hour at lunch and don't pick up their phones during that hour at lunch, and so you need to do a little bit of analysis on the competition as well. Mm-hmm. And I found in my area both were kind of favorable, and so that it was kind of like I looked at the whole area that I could drive to. I just drew a big radius and said, okay, this is my area. I'm going to find the best location that I can, and I thought I'd found it, and so just decided to go ahead.
That's great. So you found a favorable area and you decided to just start it because you thought the experience would be interesting. You saw all these other people doing it and saying, well, maybe I'm just in the wrong area. Most people I would think would try to fit that triangular peg into a circular hole in the practice they currently have, trying to say, well, I'm going to try and make it work in my practice. How did you figure out that that wasn't the case? Did you just look at the demographics for the area where your first practice was and say, this isn't an ideal area?
Well, the area where my first practice was, compared to a lot of areas around it, wasn't that bad. We were at about a 1 to 1,500 dentist to patient ratio. A lot of the other areas were half that. Income levels were okay. It's in one of the more populated counties in Maryland. And so, there are just a lot of dentists around naturally. Most of those dentists are still doing pretty well, and I was doing fine too. So, it's not to say that, it would have been a mistake to try to maximize that practice. That's what I was trying to do all along. It's just more me just kind of being restless, I think. Than to say that, it would be a mistake to try to continue with that practice and do well with it. And in fact, someone did purchase the practice and is doing quite well with it.
Yeah, that's great. So you started the startup. What takeaways did you have versus from the acquisition that went into the startup for you? Because you had to be armed with a lot more experience than if you were just to walk outside and start a practice out day one.
Yeah, that gave me a lot of experience because my first practice really was just a step up from a startup.
Mm-hmm.
They were open 2 days a week, running a pretty slow schedule. So, that I did get to experience what it's like to run a marketing campaign and hire staff, manage staff. You go through a lot of little mistakes that you wish you'd done differently. Particularly for me was a learning curve with managing staff. At first I was way too nice and, didn't really hold people accountable the way that, I should have. And as you go, I think everyone kind of learns to be a little less tolerant of, staff who aren't really putting forth their best effort. Learning how to coach people. That was probably my biggest lesson in the first few years.
So is that one of the things? I'm taking notes. I guess I should have told you I take note. I'm like a consistent note taker. So, so going from into the startup versus the acquisition, would you say that was one of the things that you worried about more in the startup than you did whenever you did the acquisition from the beginning? Basically, let me rephrase that question. That's not a very good question. What is one thing that you focused your energy on when you did the startup that you didn't think about doing whenever you acquired the practice in your first practice?
Mm-hmm. With the startup, from the beginning, I hired an office manager who has done a really good job for me in the last couple years. He's done a great job. How should I say it? I was really looking for someone who, actually hired him from Austin, Texas, and he came to Maryland to relocate.
Pretty big jump.
Yeah. But, someone who was just, a little bit higher caliber than I think someone I would have just settled for initially in my first practice. And same with the rest of the staff, really kind of being slow to hire someone, knowing that basically having a vision for the culture of your office and only picking people who you think will fit very well within that.
And why did you make that a focus?
A lot of that due to just personal satisfaction with coming into work. Unfortunately with my old practice, there were some days when I would just almost dread coming in, and it's not because of issues with patients, but issues with staff. And I'm pretty firm believer that one of the best things about owning your business is that that should not be the drawback, to your business is your staff. You have the capability of surrounding yourself with the people you want to work with. And it's one of the biggest advantages of being a business owner. A lot of people see managing staff as a disadvantage of being a business owner, but you can really flip it around too and say, if I'm good at this, then the advantage is that I can work with the people I want to work with and not just the people who happen to work here.
Absolutely. So whenever you were hiring this person that was a higher caliber, I'm assuming they probably had a little bit of a premium of what you'd be paying versus somebody else. I feel like a lot of people get wrapped up in costs. I mean, I even speak about, the 25% rule for dentists to follow of, wages, salaries, benefits, contract labor, recruitment, education, et cetera, should be, 25% of production. And a lot of people, I think, get wrapped up in that because they'll be over it. Whenever the reason that that's a problem is more along the lines of because the people that they're paying more money to aren't the people that they aren't the premium package that they should be paying for. Because if you have the people that are the premium package, they're going to generate the culture that you're speaking about and make the practice way more efficient in production and everything like that. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, absolutely. I worked in one office where they paid assistants, it was like $11 or $12 an hour, like bottom of the market, no benefits, and like they had 3 or 4 assistants. Their rationale was they could have had 2 assistants at a good wage, but instead hire 3 or 4 who only work kind of half as much, but there's more of them, so it's okay. And then that will help too when you have massive turnover every 3 or 4 months, having to hire a new assistant, that you have so many of them that you can get by. And that was, having worked in that model as an associate, I knew all the pitfalls to that. Much better model, in my opinion, is hire someone for the long term who's the best fit for your office, pay them a good wage that, I don't advocate overpaying staff. You can definitely get yourself in trouble with that. And sometimes you don't really know who the best staff is until you work with them for a little while. I mean, you can interview someone and people can be great in interviews, they can have really good references, but then turn out not to be everything that you had hoped they would.
Just real quick, so were you ready to ship your guy back to Austin, Texas if he didn't work out?
I mean, it would have unfortunately been a difficult decision to make, but yes, you do have to, how should I say this, get the right people on board. And, so if he wasn't a right fit, then, we would have had to find someone who was. Fortunately, that wasn't the case.
So I think we've got some really good points here, some really interesting things that I don't feel like I get talked about quite enough. So one of the first ways I was turned on to you. You made a really great post in Dental Town about some scheduling protocols and things like that. That when I looked at it, I said, this makes complete sense. I don't know why everyone doesn't do something similar to this in their own right. And of course, there was people that were detracting from it, saying, well, it doesn't work for me because, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And these were people that were basically making excuses to me. I thought it was a really smart protocol, and not every situation, every exercise fits every office. But I've since, joined your newsletter that you have available, that you send out these different types of information to. So anyone out there that's listening, I urge you to join Dr. Dersley's newsletter to get those tidbits of information, because they're really, really smart. If someone wants to join that newsletter, how would they do that?
Well, I have a little website, it's practiceonfire.com. It's just a little hobby of mine, it's things that I've learned over time in my practice. I like to document, and I've just learned so much from others that, it's something I like to do to share some of that information, make other people's practices more satisfying to them.
That's one thing that I found that most successful people do is that they are success begets success, in that if you are willing to reach out to someone who's been successful in something, they are, not 100% of the time, because they'll be busy people like we all are, but most of the time, if you have a genuine need or a genuine curiosity even, that they will be more than willing to share their story with you, which is kind of leads down to that mentor topic that we discussed earlier. I'm assuming in that newsletter you share details about your mastermind group. Is it closed right now?
There's two groups. One of them is pretty close to capacity. I'm very limited on who gets in on that one. It's kind of for an entrepreneur level dentist. It's just like what I said, surrounding ourselves with others who have had success, and they help foster an abundance mindset in each other. That one, if someone feels like they're a candidate for that group, they can send me an email through the website. The other group, though, that I do have more space in is for new owners, and it's a bit of a mentoring group. I try to get on there and share what I can as far as my experience in starting a practice. But a lot of the good information comes from the dentists who are currently working on practices, either acquisitions or startups. They share their story on there. And, you see what they go through with their lease negotiations and with their equipment selection and with their floor plan and with their construction bids. And, we have a general timeline on the website that I posted on the forum. It's just like all the steps you need to do in a startup, and when you do each step, and the sequencing, because if you forget to do one step at the beginning, that can be a bottleneck way down the road. It's like, oh, you got to get that done first before you can do the next step. And if you do things in the right order, you save yourself months of costs and expense and time. So that one, if someone is working on a startup or an acquisition and wants to share with the group, that's a great way to do it.
Great. So there's also an event that you're going to be hosting. So I've had a look at the docket, and you've got some really great speakers coming in. Dr. Loon from the Breakaway Practice Seminars, Dr. Chris Phelps, Dr. Tuan Pham. Dr. Pham and Dr. Phelps are actually going to be in interviews on this on this platform as well, along with you. And you've got just some really, really great information. And so if anyone out there is planning on, wanting to find more information about, being a very successful practice, do you want to talk a little bit about Practice on Fire, the seminar?
Yeah, sure. So, this seminar, Dr. Luna has been really grateful in letting us host it at his new Breakaway headquarters in San Antonio. That's going to be on November 6th and 7th this year, 2015. And it's exciting to me. I'm looking forward to attending, actually. Scott will be talking about kind of Breakaway 2.0, the newest things he's doing in his practices. We've got Gina Dorfman she's the owner of Yappy Dental Software. She's known as Mopsy on Dentaltown. She's presenting. I'll be presenting on two things. One is on practice transitions, and another thing is incorporating dental implants into your practice. That's something that is a big part of my practice, and there are a lot of myths and barriers in the way of a lot of dentists to get into implants. But hopefully with some tips, it is actually a pretty easy thing to do once you kind of overcome a couple little obstacles. So I'll be talking about that. It's a good mix of clinical and business stuff for someone who is just looking to take their practice to the next level. For more information, I'm going to have that on the website too, practiceonfire.com.
Fantastic. So that's going to be in San Antonio on November the 6th and the 7th. Is that a set date?
That is, yep, that is the date.
So everyone mark your calendars and plan to see everyone in San Antonio. So great. I really appreciate you coming on, spending your time, giving your time to all these people. If anybody wants to reach out, is the Practice on Fire website the best way to reach out and ask any follow-ups?
Two ways. Email graham@practiceonfire.com. Go to the website. You can contact me through that, or find me on Dentaltown. I'm all over the place there. Just send me a private message if anyone needs anything.
Oh, fantastic. Anyone out there in internet land, I urge you to reach out to Dr. Dersley. Thank you for giving your time in here. I think he's given us some really great information. And Dr. Dersley, thanks so much for being on.
Thank you.
A special thanks to Dr. Dersley for coming on the show with us today. Now, if you want free access to that guide about how to set effective goals and how to align those goals of professional dental practices along with your personal goals, then go to your text messages and text the word practice to 33444. That's practice to 33444. You'll get that free guide as well as every other bonus that we give out on Start Your Dental Practices podcast. So again, that's practice to 33444, or visit startyourdentalpractice.com/bonus if you're outside of the US. So that's it for today's episode, but that doesn't mean that the learning and implementation have to stop there. I've created a free report called The 15 Numbers That Will Make or Break Your Dental Practice. This report has been downloaded over 1,000 times by dental professionals. So if you want your free copy of this report that's going to outline what the most important numbers are in any dental practice, and it also includes how to look at your numbers, how to set goals, has a whole slew of really important information that is the culmination of all of my experience as a dental CPA, then just go to startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. That is startyourdentalpractice.com/free gift. And so that's it for today, Ambitious Dentist. Again, I'm Jonathan Van Horn, CPA and ABV. I'll see you next week with another world-class practice owner or consultant that will help you start your very own dental practice. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Start Your Dental Practice community. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor and go to startyourdentalpractice.com/iTunes to leave your honest feedback and review on iTunes. It's going to help me create a better experience, a better show, a better podcast for you, the ambitious dentist. Your feedback really does help, regardless if you liked the show today or not. If you didn't like the show, let me know, because it's going to help me create a better show and podcast for you. Lastly, if you know of anybody that would benefit from today's episode and today's content, today's guest, please feel free to share with them on social media or through email.